Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for coming. Today, our guest is Mr. Scott Andersen, the Deputy Humanitarian Coordinator and UNRWA Director of Operations in Gaza. He will be briefing on the operational aspect of things in Gaza. So, Mr. Scott will make some introductory remarks, and then we'll take a few questions. Please go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you a little bit today. As we pass the 12-month mark, and for me, almost 12 months, I've been in Gaza for 11 months, and it feels like we've been through 5 or 6 different iterations of what that means. And unfortunately, most changes on the ground have not been positive for the people in Gaza. It's just been very difficult since the horrific events of October 7th happened, and then the response from Israel. So what I'm going to try to do is just kind of convey what things are like on the ground. I'll work from north to south inside Gaza and then touch on a couple thematic issues. And then I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about Gaza and the operations that we have ongoing. So Gaza has more or less been cut in two at the Netzarim corridor, and we refer to it as North Gaza and South Gaza. In the North Gaza, there's give or take 470,000 people still there. And there's been an ongoing operation by the IDF, and of those 470,000, 65,000 have been further displaced again. Most from the north down to Gaza City or toward the Mediterranean near Beach Camp. But there are still about 170,000 people in the north, primarily in Jabalia. They're very much trapped in the conflict, and for them it's incredibly difficult every day. We have great difficulty getting aid to people right now in the north, and since September 30th, only 12 trucks of food have actually made it to the population. And that has come in through the Erez crossing in the north, so it's very difficult, and that's only enough for about 9,000 families, right? It's not going to get us to the scale that we need to take care of the population that's still there in the north. And this is a bit frustrating because the crossing's open and it did actually make a material difference for people in the north. And we had seen, I guess, the lurking man-made famine conditions get reversed, and people were able to have enough nutrition, and they were able to take care of themselves and their family. Like I said, the situation is reversed, and it's just not getting a lot better. In addition to the people that are trapped there, there's also approximately 285 patients still in the 3 hospitals in North Gaza. We've not been able to get fuel to them or food. We did a mission, WHO, OCHA, PRCS, and CADIS did a mission, and we evacuated 13 of the most critical patients from Kamal Adwan to Shifa, but that's just a drop in the bucket of 285. And I guess maybe just to say that the hospitals are very much hospitals somewhat in name only, because the conditions inside are not what you would think of when you go to a hospital here. The equipment doesn't exist. There's not an MRI machine in Gaza that functions still. So you have a lot of very well-trained doctors that are unable to take care of people the way you would expect when you walk into a hospital, just because they lack supplies and medical equipment that would be needed to do the proper secondary and tertiary care. If we come south of Wadi Gaza in the declared humanitarian zone that exists, there's probably 1.4 million people in a very, very small space. And it's, for them, even though it's a humanitarian zone, it's not safe. And nowhere in Gaza is safe, unfortunately. And we've seen airstrikes and missile strikes that have taken place in the humanitarian zone that have resulted in the loss of lives for many civilians, including families and including a lot of children. It's just difficult to get aid to people at all. Starting in February of this year, the IDF told all the police in Gaza to take off their uniforms and stay home. And we didn't really feel the effect of that until May 6th when the Rafah operation started, and our one main entry into Gaza through Kerem Shalom started to get, I guess, attacked by people that were looting. And it had a degradation of the number of trucks that had come in. If you look back to the numbers in April, we were bringing in 350 trucks of aid a day. And that just kept dwindling down and down and down and down to the point where if we move 30 or 40 trucks, we're having a good day. We do need an enabling environment to bring aid in at scale for people. And when I say at scale for the UN, that's 250 to 300 trucks a day in the south and 30 to 40 trucks a day in the north. If we have that number with the right type of aid, the right quality of aid, we can bring in enough for the population to at least meet their very basic necessities. But there also needs to be a corresponding number of trucks that come in for the private sector. There's things the UN doesn't do that the private sector does very well. We don't bring in fresh fruit and vegetables. We don't bring in eggs. We don't bring in meat. We don't bring in a lot of things. We bring in large staple items. That's our value added. And the value added for the private sector is they do everything else, and they do it very well. So we had a problem with looting of food in the past, last December and January. There's a very different environment then from now. In the past, people were looting because they were hungry, right? So like if I stole 2 bags of flour to take care of my family, you wouldn't see me for a while until I needed flour again, unless there was some in the market. Now people are stealing for profit. It's organized crime. There's 12 families that are fighting, well, each other as well as us to try to stake out their part of the secondary market. And we need a security solution for Rafah so we can bring aid in at the scale it's needed so the population can take care of themselves. You know, secondary to that, as a humanitarian, I find it very frustrating that because stuff is looted and put in the market, people are then forced to pay for what they should get for free. And this is a population that hasn't worked in over a year, had high unemployment rates before the conflict started, and very much can't afford to pay for things. And they're going into debt and probably other things happening that we would prefer not to know or not talk about as a way for people to take care of their families. In about a month, it's going to start raining in Gaza. All right, winter is around the corner for us, and there's a lot that we need to do between now and then so that the families are as safe and protected as we can make them. It's just simple things like road repair, picking up garbage, distributing tents, but this all hinges on our ability to bring things in at the scale that's needed. You need tarpaulin, you need tents, you need blankets for people, and mattresses, and you know, all the things that you would very much expect, as well as clothes. I mean, there's not been an importation for the commercial sector or the private sector of clothes in a year. As all of you know, young children do not remain the same size. They change quite quickly at that age. And there needs to be a way for these kind of things to be brought to the market or brought to people so that children can be warm. So they can have shoes and hats and coats and all the things that we, you know, again, very much take for granted. So I think that we can get there, but we need to, again, find a way to bring things in. And we have a lot of things in the pipeline. You know, I mentioned our difficulties bringing food in. We have 100,000 metric tons of food between World Food Program and UNRWA waiting to be imported into Gaza. That's enough for everybody for 3 to 4 months. So the supply is there and the willingness is there. The environment, unfortunately, is not there. Now, we are coordinating closely with the IDF to try to create an environment. I'd hoped we'd have a solution by now, but we're not quite there. But I do think we're very much at a tipping point in Gaza in terms of our ability to continue to fight off what would be the lurking man-made famine that I talked about earlier. So maybe 2 things, and then I'll be happy to answer your questions. First is education. In primary age education, there's 625,000 children in Gaza that should be in school now. They're about to miss their 2nd year of education. Between this and COVID, that's 4 of the last 5 years, they're not going to be in a school building. And I'm very concerned about a lost generation. And if children aren't educated when they become parents, it then becomes harder for them to educate their children, right? So this has I guess, a generational impact, and we need to find a way to get them back to learning, at least basic literacy, basic numeracy, and there's also a protection element for them. All right, it's heartbreaking to see kids digging through garbage, trying to find things to burn or things to eat. They should be in school in a safe environment where children can be children, and they need to stimulate their minds and learn. And we can do that, but we have to find space and we have to find materials, which again comes back to our ability to bring things in. So I'm going to close on the health sector. I mentioned hospitals being hospitals kind of in name only. I have the opportunity to visit most hospitals on the ground. I've done a couple after mass casualty events, and it's just horrific, is the only words to describe it. You walk into an emergency room, you can smell the blood in the air. They don't have disinfectant to clean the floors, so they're trying to clean up blood with hot water, which actually makes it worse, not better. And again, there's a great deal of frustration from doctors that are very well trained. The one bright spot, I guess we could say, is we do have decent primary health care. UNRWA is doing about 17,000 consultations a day. We're in round 2 of the polio vaccination campaign. We've added vitamin A to it this time to try to bolster the immune system for children. The first 2 days, we've done just over 150,000 immunizations. We need to get to, I think it's 560,000 is what we did last time. And we're trying to make sure that within the community, there's immunity across everyone for polio. So I will close by saying, my colleagues and I are there. We've been there, many for almost a year. There's not special housing or accommodation for us. We live very much just like everybody else does. And it was a pretty hot summer. Hopefully next year will be a little easier for everybody. There'll be a ceasefire. The hostages will have gone home, and hopefully we can begin rebuilding. But we will stay and deliver. At the moment, it only feels like we're staying. We need to work on the deliver part. But I hope we can see, brighter days ahead and kind of hope for a great improvement on the ground. So I think I'll be happy to stop there. Be happy to answer any specific questions that you may have or delve into any details as you would like.
Thank you, Scott. Scott, you're going back to Gaza next week, or?
No, I'm actually here just for a short visit. I actually live in South Dakota. I was in South Dakota when all this happened in October. And they asked me to come back and help. So I'm going to go make sure my house is still standing and check on my parents, make sure they're okay. I haven't seen them in a long time. And a very mundane task of going to the dentist, which we all have to do. And then I'll be back in Gaza. But I was just in Gaza Sunday. And when I came out, and for us, it's a bit longer of a trek than it used to be. Come out through Kerem Shalom and drive through Israel and Jordan. But it is doable. But we do spend quite a bit of time on the ground just waiting.
Thank you. Okay, let's start with Pam. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Mr. Andersen, for the briefing. It's Pamela Fall from U.S. News and World Report. As you were speaking, the Israeli ambassador at the Security Council just said that on October 14th, over 100 trucks passed through Kerem Shalom and Erez crossings, but that they get to the other side, and the problem is not aid, it's distribution. Do you agree with that, and what is the best way in a combat zone to get the food distributed? Thank you.
I generally agree, but I think it's a bit of an oversimplification of what's very complicated. And just because something passes into Gaza doesn't mean we're able to move it within Gaza to people that are very much in need. I spoke of the law and order challenges we're facing in Rafah. We tried to move a large convoy and then a smaller convoy, and over half the trucks were looted. Right? And we have a responsibility to our donors, who have a responsibility to their taxpayers, that things are, proceeding to people the way you would expect. Now, there's always going to be some loss that happens, but over 50% is not acceptable to any of us. To counter that, everywhere in the world, any country needs a police presence to operate. That's just the way we are as human beings, and there's not one in Gaza. So what's needed is some solution, and I'm not, saying that what it is, because I don't know. But there needs to be a solution that will allow trucks to move freely without being shot at by looters or being looted or being intimidated. And if we have that environment, we have shown that we can move aid at the scale needed and make sure people get it. So, like I said, generally agree, but I think it's oversimplifying what's a pretty complicated situation.
Thank you.
Ephraim?
Thank you so much, Mr. Andersen, this is Ephraim Kosaifi from Arab News Daily. You mentioned the frustration that just as you were about to reverse the man-made famine, there's been a corresponding degradation in the number of trucks coming in. Is there any relationship between the two? We've been reading that humanitarians face this moral dilemma, like as soon as they say things are getting a little better, the authorities begin to put more restrictions on aid. Is that the pattern you've been seeing?
I hadn't, I guess, really thought about it like that. I mean, I guess the first thing I would say is that for us to maintain our credibility, we have to be honest about what's happening on the ground, be it degrading, improving, whatever, because our word's only as good as it is as long as we stay honest and report honestly. I don't think anybody wants people to starve. I don't believe that. I do think that we've managed to prevent a famine from taking place, a man-made famine, and I hope that we continue doing that. But it all comes back to me to the enabling environment. We do see, on the ground, and big numbers are easy to say. In September, 1 million people didn't get food, all right? And that sounds horrible. It's much different when you talk to the actual family that didn't get the food, and they can't feed their child, or they can't feed, everybody, and the mother or father has to choose which of them is not going to eat today so their child can. That's the real world consequence that we see of not getting aid to people. So, I mean, I think we can all find things we can do better. I do think that Israel has a responsibility to provide security in Gaza because they're the only ones that are able to at the moment. And we need to find that solution. Like I said, winter is not far away. A month is not much time at all, and there's a lot that we need to accomplish before then.
Please go ahead. Yes.
Sorry, I didn't. Evelyn Leopold. On education, are there schools that are not? Are all the schools run by UNRWA, or are there other institutions?
There are two, I guess, institutions that provide education in Gaza. UNRWA is one, and then the government is the other one. And we have
What government?
Government of Palestine, or the de facto authorities on the ground.
Okay.
The challenge that we face is that every school is a shelter, right? And they're all bursting to the seams. So we have some shelters where we've been able to convince families to let us use the room they live in to provide education, or not education, learning activities for the day for children. But the numbers just aren't there. We're doing about 12,000 children a day in UNRWA, and we should be doing over 300,000 a day in UNRWA. So for the 12,000 that are getting learning activities, that's great, but there's a lot that we need to do to close that gap. And basic numeracy, basic literacy are kind of the cornerstones for children to become functioning members of society. So we can't lose this opportunity. We have to make sure we're doing everything we can to provide that opportunity for them.
Thank you. Yes, Hanin.
Thank you. Hanin Saleh, a Dag Hammarskjöld Fellow from Occupied Palestine. 2 weeks ago, the Israeli occupation killed or assassinated the UNRWA operations director in northern Gaza, Maher al-Muqayyad. I haven't heard any comments or condemnation from UN. Do you have any comments on this?
And the UN left northern Gaza October 12th, 2023. We were told we couldn't be kept safe, and we haven't been there. It's not easy to get north. It takes a lot of effort and coordination. And I don't and won't comment on things that I can't verify myself. So I saw everything that was reported, certainly, but sorry. Yeah. So I don't have any comment beyond that. We do know he was killed, but I don't know anything beyond that. I'm sorry.
And just a reminder, the briefing is about the operational aspect of what's going on now in Gaza.
Okay, I have another question. Thank you. The Israeli occupation has committed dozens of horrific massacres in UNRWA schools in Gaza, killed thousands of civilians. Has UNRWA conducted or will it conduct any investigation into these attacks, that purpose of documentation and accountability? I would like to mention example of investigation by forensic architecture, such as one due on Al-Ma'madani massacres, which clearly demonstrate the nature of these attack. Have you been used or have you want to use or plan to use these methods on your work?
It's a good question that I don't know the answer to, I'm sorry. And it's really more of a headquarters level question than a field level question. I mean, that's not something we do operationally every day, right? It's not, certainly we wouldn't have the expertise, so I will raise it with the headquarters, but I can't give you an answer today, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Are there any questions in the room or online? Last call. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mr. Andersen, for being here.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.